Hello, Easy Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Darth Easy's Movie Anatomy. Alright, so guys, welcome to another episode of my show. This is episode 4, even though I'm not really keeping track with the number of the episodes, because it's just, I don't know, number, whatever, it doesn't matter. So guys, this week in theaters we have The Mule. The Mule is a movie starring Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood, this is the first movie he's actually acted in a very long time. The last movie I remember, well, it hasn't been that long, but the last movie I remember him starring in was Trouble on the Curve with Amy Adams, the baseball movie. And so it's very interesting for him to be in a movie he's actually starring and directing at the same time. And so let's get right into this movie. So this week I am covering Clint Eastwood's masterpiece, Unforgiven, considered one of the greatest westerns of all time. The movie that you could say ended the genre, or maybe it was the final high of the western genre. Whatever it is, let's talk about this movie, Unforgiven. So Unforgiven is a movie that was released in 1992. It's another movie of the 90s. This is my third 90s movie I've covered in 3 weeks. And maybe one day I'll do a movie that's not in the 90s. But for now, let's just keep talking about these 90s gems. So basically, Unforgiven, it's a story about... It's about this... the movie starts out with these two guys. They basically attacks this whore in a whorehouse and scars up her face, and all these women get together to try to come up with some bounty so they can make these two people pay. And that's where this one kid basically recruits Clint Eastwood's character, who is a famous killer in the Old West, to try to get him back into the game. And Clint Eastwood's character is a completely changed character. His character, he doesn't want to be involved in that anymore. He is a character who just doesn't. His wife changed him. His wife's dead now, but it's a character, he doesn't even drink anymore. And it's a very interesting thing that happens. But basically he just says, well, I can do this one little job, get a little money, help out my family, and it will help our lives out. He recruits Morgan Freeman's character, him and Morgan Freeman's characters they're just good friends, and they were together all the time. Morgan Freeman's character is known for having the really great shot character. So they go off into this one last adventure to do this right thing and get some money out of it. So one thing this movie is so incredible at doing is, I've watched a lot of westerns this year. Be honest with you, this is the second time I've watched the movie, and when I first watched Unforgiven, I didn't really appreciate this film, and a lot of that is due to the fact that Unforgiven was really my first western. And that's one thing I can say about this film is that don't go into Unforgiven as your first western. Unforgiven should be like your 4th or 5th western you really watch. Because I've watched a lot of westerns this year, from the Sergio Leone's westerns like Good, the Bad, the Ugly, A Fistful of Dollars. I've watched a lot of John Wayne westerns. I've watched Shane. I've watched High Noon. I've watched a lot of westerns. So you can kind of get the feel of the western genre. It's about this guy. He rolls into town. He basically picks up this job. And then he leaves off and rides off into the end of the sunset. That's not what Unforgiven is. Unforgiven basically takes the entire genre and basically tackles it right on its head. And that's one thing I really like about the movie. The thing I really like about this movie is just it takes everything that you know about the western genre and just flips it on its head. It makes you think about things, and they're like, Clint, they tell his character, he says, "Money, you did all this thing. You shot the 2 marshals. How'd you do that?" It's like, I don't remember. I was drunk half the time. And the thing about the West is we make it look like it was this great glamorous thing, but the West was a dark and gritty place that really you did not want to live in this time in the world. And there are all kinds of things in this movie. Like, there's the part of the movie when the one guy he shoots that guy, and it was the first guy he ever killed, and he realizes this isn't the life for him. And Clint Eastwood gives that great speech. He says, "It's a funny thing when you shoot a man, You take everything that is and everything that ever will be, and you just end it. And the kid says, well, he had it coming. And he's like, we all have it coming. And it's just a great moment for his character. The parts of the movie when Morgan Freeman is getting whipped for information, and it's a symbolism for how the slaves got whipped. This movie is just such an incredible film, and one of my favorite moments of this film. This could get to the wow moment, but I will try. But I'll talk about it again. Was whenever he finds out that because basically the entire movie he's like, no, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. My wife got me to stop drinking. I'm never going to drink again. And when he finds out that Morgan Freeman's character was Shield, he takes that whiskey and starts drinking, and he basically goes off on a revenge tour on the entire town. When he goes into that little bar and has a shotgun, and you have what Gene Hackman's character says, okay, once he shoots that shell, we all go after him and we kill him. And everyone pull your guns out and kill this son of a bitch. And then he just shoots up. He kills like 6 or 7 guys. And the guy who's writing books, he asks, well, how'd you do that? He's like, I got lucky. Just like in every one of my gunshots, I shot that guy first because he was close to me. I always go for I go from bang, 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 and it's just such a fun, incredible movie. So let's get right into the thesis statement of this movie. For me, the thesis statement for this movie, Unforgiven, is what I like to call, this is the swan song of both Clint Eastwood and the Western genre as a whole. So basically what a swan song means, it's the final album. This is Clint Eastwood's final Western. I don't think he'll ever do another Western, because we think about it, the Western genre was a genre that was really built up in the 1930s and a really high mark of Hollywood. If you go from John Wayne, John Ford, from The Searchers, The Man Who Shot Liberty Balance, High Noon, Shane, and then you get into the 60s, really Westerns had start dying a little bit, but then the Westerns kind of came back with Sergio Leone's films, A Fistful of Dollars, A Good, Bad, the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and then other films like The Magnificent Seven came out around the same time as well. Also, you have other Westerns that come out, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But in the early 90s, where the Westerns were basically what the comic book genre is today. And people always start thinking, well, the comic book genre is going to go under, just like the Western genre did. Unforgiven is really the swan song of the Western genre, because it's really the final great Western film to come out before the Westerns nowadays we don't see Western genre movies anymore. What was the last Western we really saw? And the last Western was the remake of The Magnificent Seven. You have that film, The Ballad of Buster Scrooge, on Netflix right now. But really, Unforgiven was the last film which people consider one of the all-time greats. True Grit came out a few years, but there hasn't really been that film that makes people say, we need to bring back this genre. We're starting to see directors like David Mackenzie and we're seeing like guys like Taylor Sheridan. Taylor Sheridan is a really great screenwriter who's written movies like he wrote Sicario, he wrote Hell or High Water, and he wrote and directed Wind River, and all those movies are what I like to consider the modern Western. They're not set in the Old West, but they're set in that kind of same kind of mindset of this like no-win situation kind of world like the Western genre was really set in. So it really, Western genre is dead. We don't see them anymore, and it's a real shame. And that's why this is why my thesis of this film is it's the swan song. It's the swan song for the Western genre. And it's also, this is a two-part kind of swan song thesis statement for this movie. It's a swan song for Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is a guy who started off doing that Row Tide TV show, and he really made his name with Fistful of Dollars, and For a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, as this American icon for the Western genre in the 1960s. And the two, Unforgiven, this is a film that he held on to for like 20 years. He got the script, he bought the script, and said, when I get to a certain age, I'm going to do this movie, and it's going to be my final Western. And that's what this movie is. You couldn't do this movie with a Clint Eastwood in the 1970s or 1980s because he had to be at a certain point in his life to be able to do this film. And he's just so incredible in this film. And the thing about this movie is it completely tackles the entire things of the myths of the Westerns. Everything that made Clint Eastwood the actor he is was due to this movie, and this movie just basically tackles everything he ever grew up on, and everything people grew up watching his movies for, and that's why Unforgiven is probably one of Clint Eastwood's best movies. So now it's time to move on to the wow moment of the movie. The wow moment for me, there are a couple. The one scene when Clint Eastwood, he takes the bottle of whiskey and starts drinking, and he's like, I'm never going to drink again. I'm done with this life. I'm going to do this one simple job. But once he starts taking that drink, there's no turning back. He's going to go avenge his friend. And the other scene was when he's in that bar and he starts shooting up he kills like 6 or 7 guys, and it's just an incredible scene. And it's just a great moment. Let's move on to star profile. Star profiles, we look into the actors. We look to see where their career was, where their career went, and did this make their career. So we'll go to some of the lower actors. Well, first off, Richard Harris. Richard Harris was the older guy who is he was the assistant to the writer was writing about him, the Duke of Blood, or whatever they called him. So, or as Gene Hackman's character called him, the Duck of Britain, and it was just Richard Harris is a guy who he did this movie. Or really, I was like, that's Dumbledore. Richard Harris was known for he was in the Harry Potter films. He was also the Emperor in Gladiator, a film I will do a movie anatomy on in the future. I promise you that. But Richard Harris was great in this little bit of role he was in. He's not in the movie much, but I thought I would put him in here because he's a good little actor to highlight on. Another guy to do, which is a guy I did 2 weeks ago, was Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, this is the second time I've highlighted his career. He is not the star of this film, but he's a very good supporting role in this film. This guy would go on to do a lot of great films. I mean, he did Shawshank Redemption. And this is not a movie that made his career, but it was a movie that really sunk into minds that like, yeah, Morgan Freeman, he's a really, really good actor. Another actor is Gene Hackman. This movie, along with Morgan Freeman, did not make his career, but this also helped out his career. He was really the movie that really highlighted his career was Superman the movie. He did a bunch of other movies I've never seen before, but this is the movie I really consider Gene Hackman's best movie, but I haven't seen a lot of them, so I can't really say. But really, the main star to really talk about this film is Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood, this is the movie that really make us think that Clint Eastwood was a movie star. This guy did all kinds of films with the Western genre and other movies, the Dirty Harry films. But this Unforgiven was the film that really made us look at Clint Eastwood and say, yeah, he's a good director. He's a very, very good director. And he would go on to do this movie. He did Letters from Iwo Jima, which is one of my favorite movies he's directed. He did American Sniper. I don't really like that movie. He did Gran Torino and $1 Million Baby. He's done a lot of good films. So now it's time to move on to favorite quotes. Favorite quotes in this movie is the one quote I love is "We all got it coming." Just that scene when the kid is Clint Eastwood's telling him to drink, trying to get over it, and Clint just telling him to drink, and he says that goes at it in a speech. It's a hell of a thing killing a man. You take all he's got and all he's ever going to have. It's a great quote. And then another quote of the movie when he goes, "We all got it coming." I love that line. But one of the things I also like was whenever after the bar shootout, Gene Hackman, he's sitting there bleeding, and he's like, "I don't deserve this. I had a house." And Clint's like, "No one deserves this." He's like, "I'll see you in hell, penny money," and he's just like, "Yeah," and then shoots him because he knows this guy. He knows where he's going. He knows the destination. He knows he's not a good person because he even says that most of the time I was drunk and I just don't know anything. So, guys, it's time to rank this film. The ranking, I have all kinds of rankings. I've given every movie I've done so far the same ranking. And guess what? I'm going to give this movie the same one. I'm going to give Unforgiven the instant classic. This is a film which I consider probably in the top 5 westerns of all time. I don't know if this is my favorite western. I think my favorite western right now is The Searchers, but this is a really close second or third. And I very much enjoyed this film. So, guys, that ends another episode of Darth Easy's Movie Anatomy. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've never seen Unforgiven, do yourself a favor and watch this movie. This is one of the great westerns of all time. It's a film that really makes you appreciate the genre and Clint Eastwood as we go see The Mule this week in theaters. So, guys, until next week, all too easy, and make sure you subscribe to the iTunes feed and everything else. So, guys, see you next week. Bye!